Calvary App, and you're about to watch a video of a message that was preached at Calvary Fellowship in Miramar, Florida. At Calvary, our mission is to help people take their next step with God, and we pray this message helps you do just that.
Hello, how are you today? So the whole travel game is changing for me. You see, when it used to be so simple when it was just my wife and I. We were light on our feet. We could go when we wanted to go, pack light, and just do whatever we wanted to do. But now, I got 2 kids and another one on the way, and the whole game has changed. Man, we went to Massachusetts in March, and we still wanted to travel kind of light. We wanted to figure it out. We'll just check our bags, right? Nobody wants to pay those extra fees, do you, right? So we're going to try to check all the bags. Now, you can only imagine, we've got a car seat for Charlotte. We've got a stroller and car seat for Gwen, because they'll kind of take them at the end of the gate, when you get there. And we've got a bag for the girls, a bag for my wife, a bag for me, my computer bag, the baby bag, my wife's bag. We got all these, and we're going through the airport, and obviously getting ready. We were a little bit late, let me just say, okay? So we get to the airport, and it's 45 minutes before the flight. If you guys know anything, 1 hour before the flight, you can't check your bags, right? So you got to get there an hour before. And so it's 45 minutes, but we're checking, so what's the big deal? But you have to go to the counter if you have an infant, because they don't have a ticket in their lap infant. So we had to go to the counter, so now we're going to get help, right? And as we're getting help, the lady looks at one of my bags, and she says, "That bag looks a little bit big." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, but I carry this on all the time." She's like, "No, it looks a little big. You have to put it in this little thing." The little thing, that little weird thing? Everybody dreads that thing. You're just begging that they're not going to ask you to put it in there. So she goes, "Check it out, put it in there." So I put it in there. Do you guys know what the size of the bag is that you have to carry on, by the way? 22 by 14 by 9. My bag was 25 by 14 by 7. I'm like, I put it in there, and it had plenty of room here, but it just wouldn't fit in. She's like, "It's not fitting." I'm like, "Yeah, but look, it doesn't even fit this way. I mean, seriously, by volume, it's the same size." All right? And she's like, "No, I'm sorry." And I'm like, "Really? Seriously? Do you see my kids, my wife, we're late, all this, and you're not going to let," she goes, "Well, you're not going to let you go through the security to even get to the gate with that." They held us up, and we weren't allowed to get on the flight. It happened, and I couldn't believe it. All these things are running through my mind, stuff that I want to say, but I'm just trying to keep it in because my wife accuses me of complaining a lot. So I'm like, I can't believe it. We went home, we changed our bag, they gave us a later flight. It wasn't fun. But something like that probably happened to you, right? You didn't realize the importance of something. Maybe you were putting together a Christmas gift that you had, right, for your kids or for yourself, and there was one part that you just weren't sure where it went. You think, "Yeah, it couldn't be that big a deal." But later on, you're like, "That's what that part was for. I needed it," right? You've had that experience? Or what about you go to the DMV? Anyone do this? Or any important government documents that you got to get down there and you think you got everything in order? You get to the front of the line, they're like, "Where's your certificate of insurance?" I needed that? Yeah, you needed that. You're like, if I had known, come on. You guys have been there with me, right? You've been in that situation. If I had known how important 3 inches would have been, I would have prepared for it. I really would have made a difference. It's the same thing with anything that's important. And when it comes to important things, I find there's one area, though, that sometimes we don't always prepare for. We know it's important, but we're not looking forward to it. In fact, we won't even call it by its name. We simply call it the talk. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? And that's how comfortable it is. I'm talking about teaching our children about sex. I want to ask a question. I want you to be very honest, and I want you all to participate. Will you promise to participate? Okay. I want you to do this. If this has happened to you, I want you to raise your hand and leave it in the air. If your parents ever had a discussion with you about the birds and the bees, raise your hand and leave it in the air. Be honest, everybody. Okay, now everybody look around for a minute. I don't think that's 25% of this room. Okay? Think about that for a minute, right? That's how much we enjoy this conversation, or it actually happens. If you had the talk, though, you probably remember it. I got the talk. I grew up with my grandmother, okay? Imagine, 10-year-old boy. I don't want to talk with a girl, much less my grandmother, right? My grandmother started telling me all these things. It just made me feel uncomfortable and strange. I didn't really want to talk about that with her. Now, I had already known a lot of terms before she had talked to me about it, and some things I kind of knew and some things I didn't. And so I was actually curious about the talk because I wanted to confirm what I'd been hearing, you know what I'm saying? Or I wanted to make sure I knew what those terms were, but I also didn't want to let on that I didn't know anything about it. I don't know what it is. At 10 years old, you think you have to know everything about the world, right? So that's kind of the way I felt. And we can feel shame over this topic, I think, for a number of different reasons. And maybe it's because, like many of you showed, that you never got to talk from your parents. And so we're like cautious to talk to somebody else. I mean, nobody even told me what the talk's like. I mean, I know what it's about, but like, how do you do that? Or maybe affection was kind of poorly modeled in your household. So it was something that was hidden and something that wasn't talked about. So you're like, well, I don't know if it's things we just don't talk about. So we kind of feel nervous about it. Or maybe you, to some degree or another, you were a victim of sexual abuse. And so certainly it's a topic we're not really wanting to talk about. We informed our kids, if we were worried that if we inform our kids that maybe they're going to do something with it, the knowledge that they have now. So we're like, I don't know if I should tell them now what's going to happen. And even the Bible, I think, has confused us, or what our limited knowledge of the Bible might be has confused us, because some people have taught, or some groups have taught, that to be close to God or to be spiritual, then we have to deny our sexuality. And it's not true, but we've heard that, and so we think, oh, maybe it's a dirty thing. So this idea that it is kind of dirty can sometimes permeate our minds. Now, we're in the series Parental Guidance, Advice for the Toughest Job on the Planet, and today, hopefully, we're going to learn something about the toughest conversation we might have as a parent today. This is not your normal message, obviously. You saw the signs as you came in. Sex is not a regular topic in church. And today you might feel a little uncomfortable, so there might be some silence. Don't worry about that. That's normal, okay? It's like just having the talk. That's what this message is going to be like. So you might be uncomfortable, okay? And I'll promise I won't be too risque, a little bit, but not too much. And but the reason you feel uncomfortable is the very reason why we should be talking about this topic today. And here's some things that I want to accomplish. The first thing is this: no matter who you are, this message is for you, because we're going to look at a proper biblical perspective on sex. That's the first thing we're going to do. And then second, if you're a parent or you wish to be one, you're going to find some direction on this topic so that we can prepare the next generation, so they don't have to not raise their hand if that survey should ever happen to them, and that we can actually make a change in the next generation, that this doesn't have to be something that's always hidden. It doesn't have to be something that seems shameful, but it's something that we can then have healthy relationships and move into healthy relationships because they've been discussed. So we might move a little quickly today. I'm going to ask you to pull out your outlines and your pens, because there's going to be some fill in the blanks. I think you're going to want to know what those are. So the first one is this: that biblically there are two purposes for sex. And the first one is procreation. You guys kind of guessed that maybe. In the Bible, God says to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. So God told them to go forth and populate the earth. And if you didn't know it, that's how it gets populated, sex, okay? So we got that down. So number two is intimacy. The second thing is intimacy. Sometimes we only think it's for procreation. We don't realize that God has done this for intimacy. See, God is uniting two people on a level of intimacy like no other on the planet. In the book of Genesis, in the very first part of what we hear in the Bible, he says, therefore man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Now, when we read that, I often think, oh, the honeymoon, one flesh, right? But he's actually talking even deeper than that. He's talking about a spiritual connection where we become one with another person on a spiritual and emotional level that we don't often realize. In fact, you can jot this down, Ephesians chapter 5, verse 31, Paul requotes this verse, referring to it as a mystery, the mystery that God has with his people. Somehow, you can write this down too, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 13, when you were saved, you became one with God. You are somehow spiritually connected with God. We don't understand that mystery. We also don't understand the mystery when God has connected two people who are now married, engaging in intimacy in this way. And so it's very important. Something for us to understand that's very important is that you were created for intimacy. You're actually created for intimacy. God didn't create you because he needed you. He created you because he wanted to. He simply wanted to spend time with you. He wanted to know you. He wanted to be intimate with you. And he's also gone through a lot of trouble to make that possible, because he sent his son to die so that we could have that relationship. Therefore, in your outline, God made intimacy the primary need in your life. Intimacy with God and then intimacy with people. Think about it. Fairy tales inform us. It's an ultimate statement on that, isn't it? Because how does every fairy tale end? They lived? Right. That's the desire, right? That's the fairy tale. We all want the fairy tale. We all want to live happily together, right? Ever after. And so it's this idea, this core need in our core need that we have for intimacy. See, God himself tells us that. After creating everything in the book of Genesis, in the first chapter, he says it was good. Every day he says it was good. The first time he tells us it was not good is in Genesis chapter 2, and he says this in your outline, it's not good that man should be alone. I will make a helper for him, comparable to him. I mean, that's the essence of the commandments, if you really think about it. If you break it down, these guys come to Jesus. What's the greatest commandment? They ask him, and he says, it is to love the Lord your God with all your strength, with all your soul, with all your might, and to love others as yourself. And all of the commandments hang on these two. The law and the prophets all hang on this. Think about that. The law was created to protect intimacy. I mean, we don't always think about it that way, but that's what it's about, protecting those relationships. That's why he gave us the law, and it surrounds this core need that we have. It also explains a lot of earthly pursuits that we all go through. Think about it, the quest for power, money, fame, relationships, they're all an attempt to fill this need because these bring us acceptance. They bring us belonging, respect, and adoration from people, right? That's why we do all those things so that we can actually ultimately get to the intimacy part. And sexual intimacy, in your outline, is the ultimate expression of that need. Sexual intimacy is the ultimate expression of that need. It's so important that God says, do it if you're married. He does. He says that. It's in his word. Paul says, listen, it's so important, I'm going to write about it. He tells us to have sex. Listen to what it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Now listen to this. This is very key. Do not deprive one another except for with consent for a time, that you may give yourself to fasting and prayer, and then come again together so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Do you hear what he said? Do it and do it often. It's what he says. God's telling us. You didn't know you were going to come here today to hear that the Bible and God's telling you to have sex in your marriage, right? But that's what he's saying to us. In fact, he says the only reason you shouldn't be is because you've agreed to for a spiritual purpose for only a short period of time. Wow. Really? You see, often we look at icing, like sex is icing on the cake, right, of marriage. Like if things are going well, then we get to have sex. That's how we kind of look at it. We don't really understand that it's a basic need and that it's crucial to our relationship. And we're instructed not to neglect that part of our relationship. See, that's why God made sex enjoyable. It's one of the most enjoyable things on the planet, is it not? Right? We'll forego eating. We'll try to forego breathing if we could, some of us, right? That's the way it is. I mean, I can just imagine God making man out of the dust, and there he is forming him, and he's sprinkling on some skin, and he's sprinkling on some blood vessels, and then he sprinkles on some nerve endings, and then the salt cover comes off right in one spot, right? It's like, why is it so sensitive? They call them erogenous zones. Why is it so sensitive, this area, right? And God's like, oh my gosh, that was a mistake. No, it wasn't a mistake. He wanted us. In fact, he was like, you know what? Make it super sensitive because I know they're going to argue a lot, and I got to have something that brings them back together. In fact, give me a little bit more. While they're in the middle of it, they'll call my name. See, no kids need to be here right now. Okay, so that's what God did. Think about it. That wasn't a mistake. God made it on purpose. He made it good. He made it for us to enjoy us. He wants us to enjoy it. See, there's sometimes we believe that he didn't, but he did. And also there are chemical reactions that are going on in your brain. After an intimate climax, endorphins rush to your brain. And they have the addictive capacity of morphine and opium. In that moment right after sex has occurred, there's a feeling that comes over your body of deep relaxation and a sense of emotional warmth. I call it the afterglow. And when you're with that person who's lying next to you, you never feel closer to anybody on this planet than in that single moment. Think about it. It's true. And that's why God created it. And that's why he wants it in your marriage, because he wants to keep uniting you on that level of intimacy. But because of that, he's also reserved it for only a marriage partner. You see, if we don't know all this information, then maybe we don't understand why God has done that. But listen to what he says in Hebrews chapter 13. Marriage should be honored above all, and the marriage bed kept pure. For God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral. See, the marriage bed is kept pure. Adulterers means those who have sex outside of their marriage when they shouldn't be. And the sexually immoral are the unmarried that are having sex. And the reason he says he will judge it, or implies that he will judge it, is because it's not his desire for us. He's creating boundaries. So he's saying, listen, there's a problem. It could hurt you. And so I want to create these boundaries. That's what boundaries are. They're to protect us. My daughter Charlotte, when she comes outside, we don't have a very big front lawn, and she cannot go past the sidewalk. You know, you got the sidewalk, and then you got the swale. You know, that's the patch of grass between the sidewalk and the road, right? That's called the swale. And then there's the road. But she can't go past the sidewalk. That's her rule. Not because I'm mean, not because I just drew an arbitrary line and said, nope, that's the one you can't cross, because I fear if she goes over there, she'll forget where she is, she stumbles into the street, something could happen. It's for her protection. And that's what God is saying for us. Listen, there's a line, and there's a line of protection because I reserve this type of intimacy for the person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with, that only you and that other person are to share together. So what is God protecting us from? I mean, who is it hurting? Right? Who's it really hurting if we have sex with somebody else? I mean, do you want to know why it seems that way? I mean, why is it hard to realize that it can hurt us? Paul actually tells us in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 6. He actually tells us why it can hurt. Listen, he says, do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Remember, we're joined to Christ when we come to know him. Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them members of a harlot? Certainly not. Or do you not know that he who is joined to a harlot is one with her? For the two, he says, shall become one flesh. Again, quoting Genesis, that one line. But he who is joined to the Lord is one spirit with him. Underline that. Think about that. He says, you're connected to God in spirit also. Flee sexual immorality. Every sin that a man does outside the body is outside the body, but he who commits sexual immorality sins against his own body. Underline that last part. That he sins against his own party. The reason we don't understand it is because we don't see the outside effect all the time. We don't always see that. You see, sins that are outside the body, if I lie to somebody, then somebody got hurt. If I stole for somebody, then they suffer loss. If I murder, then somebody dies, right? We see the physical effect. We can kind of tell and judge that that's not right. But when it comes to sin, I mean, if we're both consenting, does it really matter? You see, sometimes we base sin on whether someone is being hurt or not. But when it comes to sex, he's saying it is sin against us internally. It damages us internally. And where it damages us is at our primary need. That's the fill-in your outline. If God created sex for intimacy, when we abuse it and use it outside the guidelines, then we actually hurt ourselves at the very core of our understanding of what it means to be intimate. So we get hurt right there. There are many people broken inside because of sexual experiences. And nowhere is that more apparent than when in sexual abuse, right? I mean, that when someone's sexually abused, we totally understand it. And if you come to know that person, it's harder for them than it is for the rest of the world to enter back into an intimate relationship with somebody. Trust is broken. All these things are messed up. 1 in 4 females and 1 in 6 males are sexually violated before the age of 12. Could it partially and possibly be linked to the fact that many of us are not passing on our knowledge to our children about sexual intimacy and the importance of it? Could that be part of the factor? But we know it. We see it there. But there are other things too. Multiple relationships just break down our ability to then be intimate with somebody else. And we know that if you've been through it, every time there's less trust, it's harder to get intimate. It's hard to get really down to the heart of who we are with another person. And it's the same thing with divorce. That is so clear, right? Two people so embittered toward each other. It's very difficult. You know, God would protect us from that. He wants to reach us. He wants us to reach our heart's desire. Your heart desire is for intimacy. He wants you to get there. And that's why he does this, not because he's a bad God. See, these two ideas inform our thinking on sex. The fact that there's boundaries, and there's some times that it can be bad for us, and the other is that it's really good, right? And you don't always hear that in church. You don't always hear that sex is really good, but it is good. And so sometimes they seem like a paradox to us. And so what we tend to do is, because it seems like a paradox, we tend to throw one out and keep the other. So we might think that abstinence is really good, so that sex must be dirty, right? Or we might think that sex is so good, then the rules have to be thrown out because they can't seem to match. But the truth is, they're two sides of one coin. They both exist. God made sex good for us for a purpose, but he also gave rules to help protect us when it comes to the very core of our being. It's with this understanding that we're going to move forward to teaching our children. Now, I wrote down a few do's and don'ts of teaching sex to your children, okay? So we're going to go through those, and then we're going to talk a little bit at the very end on how you can get even more information. So the first thing is, don't keep silent. Don't keep silent. Parents sometimes avoid talking about sex because they're just too embarrassed. And silence teaches our children, think about this, and we don't talk about it, we teaching them, even without speaking, that it's either shameful or dirty, right? This is something we don't talk about. Those are the things that we don't talk about. They're not good things. That's the way that usually works. So what we need to do is break that cycle so that doesn't continue to our next generation. Teaching our children about sexual responsibility is actually the primary job as a parent. I mean, we probably know this verse, but I'm going to read it to you, and it's your memory verse, but it's train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. God is telling us to train our children, and it includes, and it should include, this very vital, important part of our lives. Think about it, how important sex is and how much it permeates our culture. Now, whenever and however you teach your children the facts of life, there's one deadline that you need to beat, and that's puberty, okay? We need to beat that. People need a license to drive a car, right? You got to get training and a license to carry a weapon. But nature, right, and their biology just handed them the keys to life, and sometimes it doesn't come with anything, training. It doesn't make sense, does it? And we don't always think about it in that way and in those terms, but it is such an important thing for us to teach. See, we need to teach them to know when it occurs and how pregnancy can occur. And we need to tell them the deep sense of responsibility that comes along with these things. We also need to inform them of the changing of their body that's about to happen. When they start freaking out and seeing these changes occur, we want them to have a healthy place to go and talk about that. Puberty for women is from 10 to 14 years old. 10, did that just alarm you for a minute? If you're going to do it before puberty, then before 10. African American women can sometimes be as early as 9 years old. You're going to be talking at 8 years old to your children then. For males, it's a little older. It's 12 to 16. It's 12 to 16. I think I was on the later part of that scale. I don't know about you, but so this is something that we need to be addressing with our kids. See, many parents never get around to it. We saw it in the survey, right? Many parents just don't get around to it. They didn't tell us, but we don't want to be that way. You want to be informing your children's thinking. Think about this, because if you don't inform their thinking, someone else is going to be informing their thinking. 47% of high school students have experienced sex. That's almost half. Could it be because we're not informing their thinking, but the world is informing their thinking? And if we don't like that number, I don't know if you like the number or not, but if you don't like the number, then maybe it's because we have to do the job of helping them know what to expect. You're going to make a lot of mistakes in this whole teaching process, but the biggest mistake would be to keep silent, okay? Now, the second don't is don't stifle curiosity. Don't stifle curiosity. How we react to curiosity plays a big role in the process of their learning. From infancy, establishing first impressions about sex, to teens understanding that there is a safe person that they can come to and talk to about. You see, kids touching themselves and discovering their sex organs as infants and young children is a normal part of life. I mean, think about it. It's their body, right? You got stuff that's hanging around with you, okay? For guys do. Every day, everywhere you go, it's there, right? So you're going to be curious. So that's normal. But sometimes what we can do is we see that and we can, hey, stop, and we slap them, right? Don't touch that. Every time we do that, we're informing them that that's bad or that's wrong. We're giving them the impression that there's something that's not right. The truth is, it is okay. Now, teaching them about their body is not a bad thing. Maybe we fear that if we teach them something, that they're going to use it improperly. So we're often cautious to do it, and that's why we do the slap or don't do it, just forget about it, instead of entering into a conversation about what it actually is and what it's useful for or what it's used for. I remember my mom was visiting us, and my wife and Charlotte wanted to cook. They're all cooking together in the kitchen. I walk into the kitchen, and my daughter Charlotte, at 2.5, a year ago, is holding a chef's knife and cutting. And I'm like, guys, do you know she's got the knife? You know, it's like, right? Do you know she has the knife? And they're like, yeah, we know she has the knife. I'm like, are you okay with her having the knife? And they're like, well, my mom's like, well, I taught her that this end is the sharp end and is the bad and the dangerous end, and this is the safe end. And Charlotte goes, yes. She goes, this is the sharp end, and this is the safe end. Last week, I handed her a plastic knife to cut some food, and she says to me, as soon as she got it, this is the sharp end, and this is the safe end, Poppy. Even at 2.5 years old, she was able to understand something that could be potentially dangerous to her, but it was explained to her, and it didn't make her fear what it was. Our actions communicate if we are a safe person to talk to. And as they grow up into their teens, they will have questions. Always remain calm. I was surveying moms this week, and they all said similar things, and that is one of them. They said, always remain calm. Listen, you're going to be shocked at what they might know. You're going to be shocked at something they might have heard, or the question that they're asking, or what they may even have done. But listen, remain calm, because the shocked, I can't believe it, is the thing that's communicating that you're not a safe person to come to. Listen, if there's anybody you want your kids to come to, who do you want it to be? So we have to be understanding. We have to help them process what they're going through, ask them questions about what they understood and how it made them feel, and talk them through it. And then you can guide them into safe, healthy ways of dealing with what they're going through. The next thing is, don't neglect your own sexuality. Don't neglect your own sexuality. Your outlook on sex was probably taught or modeled by your parents. My wife's parents were not very affectionate toward each other. They didn't show PDAs, public displays of affection. They didn't show that. She didn't see that modeled. I grew up around my grandmother. My grandfather died younger. There wasn't a whole lot of interaction. I had seen some. So neither of us had a model to follow when it came to normal couple affection. And that is key to a relationship, guys. That is so key to what's going to happen that evening with you and your wife, okay? And if you haven't had that, then you may not know how best to enter into that, because we think sex happens automatically. It doesn't happen automatically. Ask any couple who's in here who's married. When we were first married, we struggled. I'll be honest, we struggled. I'm just going to bare my soul here. We struggled in that area. And I tell people when we do premarital counseling, I tell people and talk to them, and other people have too. But we're embarrassed to tell people that you struggle in that area. I remember in the beginning, I would say, hey, do you want to have sex? And she'd be like, she would either be quiet or just say no. And then I would talk to her more. She goes, don't say it like that. Don't ask me if I just want to have sex. Talk to me romantically. Tell me things. And I'm like, so do we have an appointment tonight? She's like, what? With Dr. John? She's like, no, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I'm like, sex, baby. I'm talking about sex. And then we both got frustrated, and then nothing happened. And then the morning she woke up, and she's like, I really wanted to have sex last night. And I'm like, well, why didn't we? Right? Because I said I wasn't going to yell over the thing. Because sometimes we're not prepared. We haven't seen it modeled for us. You see, parents need to have a healthy sex life. I've already explained the importance of physical intimacy, and that the Bible tells us and instructs us that we should have it regularly. But don't be fooled. It's not automatic. It doesn't just happen. You see, the world would have us believe that everybody has it all together in this area, but it's not true. Or you wouldn't have Viagra commercials, right, guys? How many couples have had to work toward a healthy sexual relationship? It's a lot. And you may be a single parent, and you're wondering, how can I model this? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But when couples come for counseling, I often ask this question, point blank, as we're talking, when's the last time you've been sexually intimate? And some people say weeks, some people have said months, and some people have said years. I don't know how you can stay in a marriage years without sexual intimacy. You see, sex is like the gauge on the dashboard of our marriage. And when it is empty, like your fuel gauge, then your marriage is in trouble. This is a sign that something needs to be fixed. You see, life can get busy. There's schedules, there's kids, there's marital strife, and there's even sin that gets in our relationship. If your gauge is on empty today, and you're thinking, man, you said that, and it's hitting me right to the core, then both of you know that something needs to be addressed. And it may be simple as budgeting time for sex. That could just be simple as that. It could be more involved. It might be a conversation that you have with your spouse to talk to them more deeply about it. Or it could even be that you need counseling, that it's greater than yourselves. And if you see the problem and you haven't been able to fix it, then maybe it's time to drop our pride and just say, I need counseling. We're going to talk later on how you can get that, but you can also go to the next step table outside and sign up for counseling here at Calvary if that's what you'd like. Modeling is so important, but it can't happen if marriage relationships are strained. We can't be modeling it for our kids if we're not having healthy sexual relationships, and that's why we need to work on it. Now we're going to move to the do's really quickly. Do start talking about sex early. Start talking about sex early in the relationship with your kids. The best time to start the conversation about sexual things is when they're young, when they're little babies even. Kids have no shame. Stuff like this doesn't bother them at all. It's the perfect time to have a conversation. When we were returning from that same flight, or actually we think we were in Boston. We get off in Boston, and my wife says, Charlotte, I got to change her. She smells. Gwendolyn, excuse me. I'm going to take her to the bathroom. I say, Charlotte, do you need to go to the bathroom? No, I don't need to go. Are you sure? Yes. Okay, so come with Poppy. We're going to the baggage claim. We went down because they allowed us to check a few things. We went, and we got to the baggage claim. There was a bunch of them out there. There's one area, there's a baggage claim all alone, and a woman was sitting on it. It wasn't moving, and Charlotte thought that was the coolest thing. So she walks over there. Poppy, I want to sit over here. I want to sit over here. All right, we're waiting anyway. She goes, sits down. Then she goes, Poppy, I got to go to the bathroom. Like, now I got all this other stuff I'm carrying, and you have to go. Mom already went. She's like, come on, let's go to the bathroom. No, Poppy, I want to go right here. I'm like, she thought the baggage claim was that cool. Well, she carries her own little porta potty backpack, too. There was one other thing we had to carry, but she's carrying that. So I'm like, really? No, not here. It's a public place. Let's go. No, here, Poppy. She's about to go ballistic. I got so much to carry. I'm like, all right, I give up. So we pull out the little potty. There she goes. Boom, standing on the conveyor thing. It's not moving. Standing there, bam, down to her ankles. Boom, just sitting there. People. No shame. They don't have any shame. We begin creating the shame. Start the conversation while they're young. It can start early while you're talking to them. Curiosity is always a great opportunity. They're in the bath, and they grab themselves. They do certain things. You know what? We talk about your eyes and how important. They talk about the nose. They're in the nose. They're in the ears. They're in your hands. We tell all this stuff, but we don't tell them what the other stuff's for. And we need to use real words. We need to use the words penis and vagina. Sorry, church, I know, right? God knows. They're not dirty words, but we feel like they are, don't we? We need to start telling them, and we don't have to tell them all the information, okay? They can't even comprehend it, but we can start by talking about those things and letting them know, listen, that is as special as anything else. It's unique as anything else on your body, and it does have a purpose, but it's for later. But we can begin to talk to them about those things, have the conversation. Sometimes we should at least have a conversation about it before pre-K. Because by the time they go to school, they're going to be meeting other kids, and they should have some knowledge of what's going on, at least about their body parts, at least how to protect them, who should be about privacy and about boundaries. So those things have to be addressed even younger, and we have to tell them why to some degree. Now, the next do make sex an ongoing conversation. When to tell your child about sex is a sensitive issue. Right now, when you walked in here, most of you were thinking, if you knew what the topic was, just tell me when. Right? Just tell me, when is the time I need to talk to him about? Well, listen, that is not the right philosophy. One and done is not the right philosophy. Most likely, they've already heard about sex before you even mention it. Just like I said, my experience is I had already heard about it. Many of you had already heard about it before your parents had talked to you, unless they were really good and had practiced this their lives. You see, it's a life journey, and they're going to hear things all along. And in kindergarten, kids are already going to hear stuff. My sister-in-law tells me the story of her daughter at 4 years old. 4 years old, goes to pre-K. She comes back one day and she says, "Mommy, do you know that princess and princes have sex?" "Oh, really? What do you mean by that, darling?" "What do you mean?" "Well, that's when the princess lies down and the prince comes to her and wakes her up." "Oh, you mean like in the fairy tale, they have a kiss. Is that what you mean?" "No, the princess lies down naked and the prince comes naked and lies down on top of her." "Okay, we need a little conversation right now." That's 4 years old in kindergarten. You know, a lot of us are thinking, man, when can they handle it? When is it going to be 12 years old, 14 years old? No, they need to know now. And we can begin as simply as talking about it when they're in the bath time or my wife is pregnant. Charlotte already knows that there's a baby inside of mommy and that it came from mommy and daddy. She doesn't know everything else, okay, but she knows enough. She's already started to know what it is. In fact, she's already named him. His name is Woody. Just so you guys know, my son's name is Woody. Nickname, okay? One and done is the wrong philosophy. See, most of us thinking we should just, when are we going to have the talk? It's not the talk, it's a bunch of talks. Our one conversation is not enough to inform our sexual outlook. Not every issue is covered with one topic. Think about it. Conception is only one topic. There's gender identification, sexual orientation, there's oral sex, dating, masturbation, pornography. All of these are conversations in and of themselves that will happen along the life journey that you're walking with your kids. But your kids have the opportunity to see pornography sooner than my generation did and the generation before me, because you click the wrong button and it's right in your face, right? That can happen simply and easily, and kids can be exchanging that in schools because they all have their own phones and they all have access to internet when the parents aren't even around. So this is a reality. Listen, repetition is the key to learning. That's what it tells us in the Bible. When Moses wanted to inform the people of how do you keep this happening from generation to generation, how do you keep them obeying, respecting the law and putting God first, this is what he said. "These words which I command to you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children and shall talk of them when they sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them down on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." He's saying when you rise up, when you lie down, reinforcement, reinforcement, reinforcement. The Bible is telling us this is the way we train and teach, and this is what we need to be doing, especially on this most important topic. Your child will go to someone for their sexual questions. They're going to go to somebody. Eventually, it's going to happen. It could be their friends because they feel safe, and it's all right because maybe they don't feel like they have to know everything. But it's going to go to somebody, and when that curiosity comes, who is it that you want them to go to? Because you can't control their curiosity when it happens or what somebody's going to say to them. You're not in control of that. But you can create a dialogue that's been going on through their life so that they feel comfortable to come with you and talk when they hear something that maybe they didn't know what it was, or when they're curious and they will be able to talk to you because you've had the conversation going for a while. The last do is model healthy affection. Do model healthy affection. Parental affection plays a huge role in forming a child's attitude about sex. How the husband treats the wife. I talked about it earlier, PDAs, right? They're not personal digital assistants that came along, little devices. Okay. So listen, hugging, holding hands, kissing, caressing your spouse is so important to the development of our children and what they see. Guys, we need to do this not so that we can have a great night. We need to do this because we are informing the next generation. It's so important. And even my daughter is hilarious, man. When we kiss, sometimes she doesn't always see us, but when she sees us once in a while, she'll go, "Kiss her again," sometimes she'll say. And it's like they want to see that. It's helping them understand that it's good and it's important. But it's not just in what we display, it's also in our conversations. How we talk to and about our spouse is important. Children are always present. They're always there. You never know when they're listening. They're hearing you and you don't even understand half the time that they're listening. But this type of affection or lack of will teach our children healthy senses of husband and wife closeness. Especially in divorce cases, like the husbands, maybe in their own time with their kids, saying bad things about the wife, or the vice versa, the wife saying bad things about the husband, for your kids' sake. That all may be true, whatever it is that you have to say about them. But for your kids' sake, talk respectfully about that person. When you're dads, you lead the way in this. Talk about that spouse in your family, outside of that family, in the right way, in a praising way, so that your children will grow up with healthy attitudes when it comes to this important thing. Modeling also occurs between a parent and a child, okay? Not just between parents and parents, but a parent and a child, both sexes, moms and dads, affectionately loving their kids in healthy ways, hugging them, kissing them, holding their hands, patting them on the back, spending time with them. 5 minutes is not enough in the day. 10 minutes is not enough. You have to spend that time with your children. Here, if you're a single parent, is where you can help make up some ground. And I know it's even harder for you because your schedules are more difficult, but they need that. They need your affection because they're missing half of it. And so, healthy affection toward them. Husbands to sons, husbands to daughters, wives to daughters, wives to sons. All of it is important, so important. And if you're a single parent, try to find a role model of the opposite sex. If it's a brother that you have, if it's somebody that you know, get them involved in areas where they can be around healthy men in their lives. A child's self-esteem, it's your last fill-in, plays a major role in their sexuality and gender identification. A child's self-esteem plays a major role in their sexuality and gender identification. You see, the greater your child's self-respect, the less likely they are to try to prove themselves sexually, men or women. If their esteem is better, they're not going to try to have to prove themselves. And if their esteem is low, their self-worth is low, they're not going to try to find their self-worth through sexual expression, which we've heard and we know the stories. So how we parent, how we teach our children, how we act toward them, how we show them love, how we show our spouses love, all of this is so important, and we don't even think of it in those terms half the time. Because we're thinking about what our needs are, how we're feeling, if I do want to be affectionate to my wife at this time or not, or my kids at not, depending on how they're acting. No, we have to supersend those. We have to rise above that and realize that we are training another generation. So what do I do now? Maybe you're like, my kids are grown up. Maybe it's too late. They're already in puberty. The school's already taught them. It's never too late. God is the God of redemption. That's what he's in the business of doing, is redeeming. So there's a few things that maybe we can do, whether we're single parents or parents together. If you're parents together and you're struggling and you're saying, man, when you talked about the sexual thing, it's true in my life. You're just saying it in your head. Nobody else has to know. And if you're saying that's true, then check off on your card right here. Just send me parental resources, or write in the request, seeking counseling. Just seeking counseling, because we'll sign you up. If you check off the box, we'll also send you information where you can get counseling, because I'm going to send an email to everybody today, and that's your other step, is you need to learn. If you came in here and you're just hearing this for the first time, and I'll tell you what, I only had to study this for this message, and so it's how I became informed. But I'm still going to keep reading, because there's a lot of books out there, great books, Christian books, that tell you these things, and they're going to help you. But the more you're informed, the more it's on your mind, the easier it is to do. And so I want to encourage everybody here to check off, if you're a parent, that send me parenting resources. It'll be an email that you get this week. And then I want you to purchase the books or go to the websites and begin to learn, so that you can inform the next generation of healthy sexual attitudes, healthy biblical attitudes when it comes to sex. Listen, I also want to say this, guys, as couples, we always have to be working on our marriage. We always have to be working on it. We have a marriage retreat that's going to be happening on August 12th through the 14th, and we don't do it just because it's a lot of fun. But we don't just do it because of that, but because we know that we all need maintenance. You might think your marriage is good, but go there and make it better. Renew intimacy. Go there and enjoy all that God has asked you to enjoy. Maybe somebody's here today and you're just thinking, maybe I've already blown it. And I don't even know what to do. Maybe you're somebody we talked about the boundaries of sex, and you're thinking, man, I don't even know how to come back from that. God's done so much so that you guys can enter into and enjoy the primary need in your life, which is intimacy, that he's willing to help you do whatever you need to do. Whether it's to come to him and ask forgiveness and he'll forgive you, whether it's guidance and help by the power of his Holy Spirit, he's willing to do that. But the first step is going to be accepting Jesus into your life. When I talked about that step, we become one with God. If you have never accepted Jesus in your heart, you're not one with God. You don't have that spiritual connection. You may know of him. You may have heard his name, but you do not have the spiritual connection that you need to have with your Creator, that intimate Creator, that intimate affection. It's so easy to do. All you got to do is ask him. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to close in prayer, and then at the end of that prayer, if you want that connection with God, just pray, repeat the words that I'll instruct you to do. So God, I just want to come before you and thank you, Lord, that we can walk into a church and maybe hear a message that we wouldn't expect to hear in a church, but Lord, one that's so necessary. I hope today was kind of a wake-up call in all of our hearts that this is a super important topic for each of us. Lord, no matter where each individual is at here right now, Lord, meet us. Minister to our hearts. Lord, show us what we need to do to be better as parents or in the area of our relationships, Lord, right now, whether we're single or married. Father, I pray for your guidance and your help, Lord, as we look forward to transforming us and the next generation. Listen, if you want to know Jesus, and you want to be one with him and have that spiritual connection and intimacy with God, just raise your hand right now. Just put your hand in the air. I see your hands. God bless you. I see your hands. God bless you all. Right now, the whole church, we're all going to pray together. Just repeat these words. Dear God, I come before you today, and I confess I'm a sinner. I need you. I want you in my life. I want to experience intimacy with you. Thank you for dying on the cross. Thank you for being my God. Come into my life right now. In Jesus' name, amen.
We hope you enjoyed the message. If today you want to take your next step with God and give your life to Christ, please visit mycalvary.com/begin. We have a free gift for you. We also want to encourage you to share today's message with all of your friends and family and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. From all of us at Calvary, God bless you.